Alright, so what I'm working on now is the van. And I'm trying to take the exhaust manifolds off because the studs that connect the bottom of the manifold to the rest of the exhaust are like broken, stripped out, and they never made really a good seal the entire time I've owned the van. So it's always had exhaust leaks, some kinds of problems. And I've tried drilling them up in the past, but with the way the engine is, there's not really a lot of room to get a drill in there. So I'm pulling the manifolds off. That'll give me a chance to replace the manifold gaskets in case those are leaking as well. Now, it is a tough job getting in there. You know, in a normal car like a Camaro or a Chevelle or something like that, it's pretty easy to get to the manifolds. They're right there, it's an open engine bay. But the engine on the van is sitting in a little box between the seats. And so it is quite the mission to get in there, especially when the bolts are really tight and seized because they haven't been taken apart since 1969. This engine is a factory replacement engine, so it was a spare engine built in 69 as far as I'm aware. It sat on the shelf. The original buyer of the van blew the engine up, got a replacement, and this engine probably hasn't been rebuilt. The van has less than 100,000 original miles. So, trying to take this apart, I'm on the last bolt on the driver's side manifold. The passenger side I'm on the same bolt, but it seems to have stripped round, so I'm going to have to probably cut that off if I can't get it loose. Now, getting the manifolds off is a pretty straightforward process. There's this heat shield that you have to take off. I'll explain that once I have the manifold off. And then the only other thing is you'll see the alternator sitting down there, and there's a little bracket mounted at the front of it, kind of hard to see. It's that piece right there. And that bolts to those two bolts, which is at the front of the manifold. That'll all be a little easier to see once the manifold's out. So, I didn't want to show the whole taking all the 6 bolts out because it's taking me a few days because, you know, it's why I have yoga when you work on cars, especially this van. So, hopefully, this last bolt it popped loose, so hopefully it's coming out fairly easy. And, oh yeah. I'm spraying a PB Blaster in there to break it loose. And I have a swivel head socket wrench on there so I can actually get to the bolts on the side here. I already took the spark plug wires out so that off of the plugs. The interesting thing about this van is most of the time in the cars the spark plug wires come over and to the side. But on a van, they come up from underneath because everything on this van is meant to be serviced underneath. That's also why the alternator has that special bracket. It's mounted really low. And I'll go over that a little more when we're putting it back together. But yeah, so almost everything on this van is accessible from underneath. It's everything they could with a standard small block Chevy. Alright, that's almost out. Enjoy the squirrel staff and stuff on top of the engine. Vacuum it out. Alright, that's out. Now, to get it out from in here, disconnect that on. There we go. Dipstick is totally in the way in the back. Let's see here. There we go. Cleared the dipstick. Try to maybe bring it around the front here. Oh, and there goes the alternator. Alright. It's out. I've attempted this. Oh, I hope that's not a horrible crack. Well, that also probably explains the exhaust leak. Alright, so here we have the manifold. And this looks like it might be a crack. Now, I didn't do that. I don't think you can really crack a manifold by loosening nuts, and I just pulled it out and didn't bang anything. So that's gonna be an issue. Now I have to find another one of these. But hey, this is a good thing that I took this all apart, because it would have been impossible for me to see that crack without taking it apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab the wrench and I'll show you how to take this out. So one thing that's also kind of neat is, like I said, this is super original. So it has these little things on it that you're supposed to fold the tab up to prevent the bolts from coming loose, and they sit right in there like that. So that's pretty neat. So let's go ahead and get that socket wrench off, or that socket out. And so this bolts on the side of the engine, and there's not really a lot of room because of the doghouse, and so I had this little pivot thing in there. Made it kind of hard because it wants to angle the socket all the time, but it came out all right. Okay, get this off. Huh. Well, the socket is sticking on there. There we go. And then get the bolt out as well. And so yeah, these are the original ram horn exhausts. Probably not a super thermally efficient, making, like, especially you would think that you'd want the manifolds underneath, since the van has a doghouse and everything, try to get the heat under and away from the engine. But as you can see, those are the bolts that I was talking about. This is the only one that's the proper length. These are both broken off, and so I need to take them out. And it's a lot easier here because the way the block is cast, it kind of comes out, and it is almost impossible to get to this. So I'm going to try taking all three of these out. I'll replace them with new ones while I'm got it out, and I'll try getting this bolt out as well. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the preheater. So I'll grab the air cleaner out of the van. So this is your standard exhaust manifold. It mounts on the driver's side of the engine, and this is where that alternator bracket hooks up, and this obviously goes to the rest of your exhaust. Now obviously there's this horrible crack in it, so we need to get another one. But to get these off, if you have them all original, there's this extra little preheater that comes on it, and that is this little sheet metal assembly here. It's in two pieces. One piece goes behind the manifold, the other piece goes on top of it. And it is held together with a few sheet metal screws. And so there's some on the top here that are pretty easy to see. And it bolts up to something else we'll talk about in a sec. But then there's also these two pieces, these two bolts underneath. Just standard sheet metal screws. But in order to remove this one, you have to take out the spark plug heat shield. So you have to take that out, then get to the two underneath, and then this will all just come apart. The top part just slides out from the back, and this sits over the entire manifold like that. As you can see, this piece sits right in the front, this piece sits in the back, and they bolt together. And the purpose of this, so it all bolts together like that. And so what this does is there's this hole on the top here. This tube attaches to it. This is a metal tube. They really didn't care about weight reduction or anything back in the day. This is a metal thing, and it's not super heavy, but nowadays that'd be plastic or maybe a rubber little thing. And so this sits on the top of the engine, and then this bolts right up on here, and see, like that, and this comes up and goes into our air cleaner. And so that's what this hole right here is for. And so what it does is when the engine is cold, this valve is closed, so air doesn't come in through the front. Instead, it comes in from underneath and is preheated by the exhaust. And so this is, I forget exactly what it's called. I'll put a little picture and caption as to what it is. And so yeah, this whole little system that goes to the top of the engine, I can show it all once it's all put back together. But yeah, this all just bolts together. And this piece comes up like that and hooks up to the air cleaner. And also on here you have a little bolt for your dipstick. So this is where the dipstick threads in. And this is actually threaded. There's a little square nut welded to the back there. So yeah, that's the a stock 69 air preheater. Something that you never really see. A lot of times people take that off just because, you know, it's all these extra pieces. You have to take this off in order to get to the manifold bolts. So it's a big pain in the butt. So most of the time people leave it off because it doesn't really do much after the first couple minutes. So yeah, now the exhaust manifold is out. And I'm going to try taking the other one out. And I guess I don't have to worry about taking these studs out because this manifold's got a big old crack in it. Finally got the passenger side manifold out. This is the one that had the rounded nut, opposite of the cracked driver's side manifold. And the grinder there gives a little hint as to the surgery / mutilation that just took place. So this bolt right here got rounded off, and so I tried just grinding the head of the bolt off to pull the whole thing off. Yeah, that didn't work. The entire bolt is seized in there, and I can't just drill into it because the side of the doghouse is right here. So literally you have about this much room. So what I did to get this bolt out was I ground a channel right in there with the grinder. You literally have like this much room. There's hardly any room in there. Initially I tried, so this is how I basically looked at it. I tried cutting some slits in here with this small pneumatic angle grinder to try to relieve the tension in here to loosen the bolt. That just didn't work. I didn't have quite the reach in there. So you can see the side of the bolt is here, so I cut through, and I knew this bolt was loose because the entire manifold would pivot on that one last bolt. And so finally I cut through the bolt in here. I stuck a screwdriver in here and pried against that bolt, and it pushed loose, and then I very carefully wedged the screwdriver in between the head and the cylinder head and the manifold. And if you do that, you gotta be real careful not to gouge that manifold surface. Luckily I was between the manifold and the gasket, not between the gasket and the cylinder head, so I didn't scratch anything up too bad. So then once I got that out, this entire thing eventually cracked loose, put a bunch of PB blaster in here, pulled it off, and then this literally came out by hand because I knew it was already loose. You can see the PB blaster on the end of those threads. So the reason I just decided to mutilate this one is, one, I needed to get it the heck off, and two, the other cylinder head was cracked. And so this has been through just as many heat cycles, and so I figured might as well just get a new pair. Well, not a new pair, but get another pair rather than risk this one developing a crack. Might have internal stuff, I don't know. So yeah, time to get a new set of heads, or manifolds. So this is a before and after comparison of the clean bolt and the old bolt, and as you can see, it makes quite the difference, especially when you're cleaning out these flats. That's the part that usually seizes on the manifold, and so getting those nice and clean is nice. Then of course having nice clean threads is great for being able to get accurate torque and you know, having the anti-seize work properly. Alright, so I cleaned up all the exhaust bolts. They're all nice and ready to be reinstalled. So a lot of them use, the 4 outer ones on each side use these little locking things. And so the way it goes is the bolt goes through this and then the little washer. So this sits between the washer and the bolt. And then these tabs bend in to hold the exhaust bolts from rotating. I'm not going to reuse those because one of them is completely missing, and then they're all bent and one of them is broken. So it's not that big of a deal. I'll go ahead and leave those off. But you know, that's what it looks like for anyone curious. And then this is all the crud that came off of all the bolts with the wire wheel. So definitely made quite a difference. It's a great way to clean up the threads. And yeah, we'll go ahead and put some anti-seize on them and throw them back in.